Oh, sorry. Didn't see you walk in. My name's Mr. Burba. Well, actually, you guys already know that. Well, yeah, guys. So I'm currently in the building. Well, not in the school building, but I'm in my house. But for today's lesson, just make sure if you have any questions that you stop in after school to just check for understanding. But anyways, here's what you got to do for today's goal. And what I recommend is while I'm going over this goal, that you take out a sheet of paper and you go ahead and write down this goal. All right. Our goal is to analyze the continuities and changes that occurred as the Arab Empire would grow during the post-classical era. All right. That's a very wordy goal, so I'm going to break that down for you. But you want to make sure that by the end of this lesson that you guys are able to fulfill that goal using the evidence that provide you. All right. So make sure you write that down. Like, do it right now. All right. If you are watching this video individually, hit the pause button, get out your notes, and get that goal on there. Right, Riley? Yeah, she agrees with you. All right. Okay. Anyways, let me break this down for you. So this is what this means. Continuities and changes. Remember, continuities are things that continue from one time period onto the next. Changes are things, obviously, that due to political, economic, or religious factors, they no longer continue. They change within this time period. So what we want to figure out is, as a result of the spread of Islam, what are some things that would continue in the new Arab Empire and things that would change? All right. So let's go ahead and put this into context first. These are some of the questions that we want to make sure that we answer. All right. Number one, who was Muhammad? Number two, what is a caliph? And number three, what is the difference between Sunni and Shia? What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 1 minute right now. So I'll give you till about 3 minutes into this presentation. I want you to go ahead and just answer those questions. Think about it in your notes. Go for it. Yes, actually, go ahead and write that down on your paper, Anthony. All right. So that's roughly about 45 seconds to a minute. I know I said 2, but just for the sake of time, I want to make sure that we're able to get through this. So I'm going to explain these 3 things. I want you to check your understanding on this. This was an essay, right, that I was writing, analyze the continuities and changes that occurred as the Arab Empire grew during the post-classical era. These are the things that you want to mention for contextualization. You know, that background information about the Arab Empire as well as Islam. So a couple things you want to make sure that you get. Number one, who was Muhammad? If you mention something along these terms of he was a prophet, or in other words, he was the last messenger of Islam, then that is absolutely correct. Remember, these 2 things actually relate, right, Rudd? Prophet means messenger. And in this case, he was the last messenger. Remember that this was the time where you would get the divide between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, right? It is because there were many figures in Islam that could also be seen as figures in Christianity. Jesus was a prophet. Moses was seen as a messenger. Abraham was also seen as a messenger. But remember that the angel Gabriel appeared in front of Muhammad and basically told Muhammad that Judaism as well as Christianity, the other monotheistic faiths, in some ways have lost their focus, have lost their idea of social justice. And those are things that were important with Islam. So this is where we would get now the difference between Islam, Judaism, as well as Christianity. Remember, there's many similar documents many similar figures between those 3 religious faiths. Later on, as we go through the rest of the semester, we'll review that. But for the context of this lesson, we want to make sure that we understand who Muhammad was and why he's important in terms of Islam. Right? So you've seen as a prophet. The caliph, if you mentioned the term caliph, if you believe that this was the term leader of Islam, then you were absolutely correct. Why this is important is because going back to our objective here, of analyze the continuities and changes that occurred as in the Arab Empire, right? This right here, one of the things that we will understand or we will look at is specifically this is the first change that we have, right? The first change that we have here, 1 second, guys, sorry, would be the divide between Sunni and Shia. All right. So what exactly is the difference between Sunni and Shia? If you brought up anything in regards to the leader of the Islamic faith being elected or being in the bloodline of Muhammad, then you are absolutely correct. All right. Remember, going back to point 2, Caliph means leader of Islam. And what we're getting here is that Sunnis typically believe that the Caliph, the leader of Islam, should be elected. On the other hand, Shia, or Shiites, typically believe that they would be in the bloodline of Muhammad, that the leader should be. So there's a lot of debate here. And this is still very important because it goes on today. I mean, if you watch the news, whatever news source you may watch, you talk about the Middle East, always talk about Sunni and Shia conflict. I mean, it's very much relevant today. We can see that as a continuity. But it all goes back to who should be the first leader, or I guess you could say who should be the leader of Islam. In fact, what I have here is you could notice that the first ever caliph was Abu Bakr, and Sunnis acknowledge that. They realize that. Shiites or Shias would argue that it would actually be the fourth caliph, who was Ali, because he was the first one to be in the bloodline of Muhammad. Overall, big picture, what you want to understand is this would be a change. That in a post-classical era, this would be a change in the way that Islam would be practiced. That Sunnis would believe, I mean, you just bring up the whole conversation I brought up with leadership. I don't want to get redundant. All right. So next point that we want to understand is, or why this is important, why this leader of Islam is so important, was because, remember, a main difference that we would get between Judaism, Islam, as well as Christianity, that the leader, right, the leader of that religion is not only a religious leader in Islam, but they're also a political leader. And you can definitely see that in this map right here. A couple things I want you to notice is if you look at this in the blue, at the death of Muhammad in 632, that the Arab Empire, or Islamic Empire, was limited just to Arabia, right? But one of the things that we talked about that is very important, might show up as a future test question, is that remember that one of the reasons why Islam was able to spread was because there was a lot of conflict between the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire right here, right? And the Arabic Empire is right in between these two. And these two have been in an ongoing war for, a long time before the post-classical era. So as these two geographic areas would weaken, this would be very advantageous towards the caliphs as well as the Arab army or the Islamic army, because of the weakening of the Byzantine and the Persian empires, right? It allowed them to spread their religious faith, but as well as, if you could look at this map, using military conquest, expand their empire. This color right here, what is this? Is this, I'm not even sure what color this is. I think that's fuchsia. No, that's not fuchsia. Blue-green, whatever ugly color that is. What you want to understand is that this is in 661 after the first 4 caliphs. It would be up to Egypt, Syria, and Persia. And this is phenomenal to understand, is that you could really see that the rise of Islam is prominent here because, remember, one of the tenets or pillars of Islam is that you pray specifically towards the direction of Mecca. And Egypt would convert to a very high Muslim population. And even today, you could see that, right? This green right here, this is after the conquest of the Umayyad caliphs, and this is in 750, right? And this goes on to my next point, the difference between the Abbasid and the Umayyad caliphs, right? One thing you want to understand is that another change that you would get would be conversion of Jews and Christians. Did they convert? Make sure you get this down. Yes, they did. They did. And here's why. In Persia, the evidence that we have is that 80% would convert. That we would get a change of religious faith. Remember, Persia, they were typically Jewish, or Zoroastrianism was what they practiced. And the reason why they would have this change would be similarities. All right? What I want you to do is, I want you to think about this. Is remember, the Byzantine Empire was typically Christian, right? I want you to consider why they would convert it. It was so with these similarities. So go ahead, take 1 minute, just compare and contrast Christianity with Islam and Judaism. All right, that's roughly about a minute. But some things I want you to consider. Number one, monotheistic. Number two, Christianity and Judaism, or Christianity and Islam, many of the same figures. Number three, social justice, right? That was an important element of both Christianity as well as Islam. I want you to think about this. Look at the Ten Commandments, right? There's that element of social justice that exists. Thou shalt not steal, right? I mean, you could see that as well in Islam. You know, the five pillars: giving charity, giving alms, 2.5% of one's, salary that should be donated to charity. So this was something that made the conversion a lot easier with Persia. Once we get to, and also parts of Byzantine Empire, once we start talking about India, it's going to be completely different. Another reason why you want to understand would be tax. All right. One difference that you want to make sure that you understand here, the difference between the Abbasid and Umayyad Empire, right? Remember, the Umayyad would come first, and they would be overthrown by the Abbasid. Was that the Abbasid Empire? They did allow Christians and the Jewish population to participate in everyday society, right? They tolerated them. There was no forced conversion. However, one reason why you'd get a pretty high conversion was specifically because taxes, right? You were seen as a second-class citizen, and you were forced to pay a tax if you did not convert to Islam. So if you were someone that was, maybe not necessarily as wealthy, this was something that you would make sure that you would do, convert specifically because of the extra means of money. That's not to say that it was only an economic reason, but it was also, of course, those religious reasons as well, talking about those similarities. So, I mean, you could label this based on going back to our objective, scrolling back to slide 1, is analyze the continuities and changes that occurred. Well, one of the changes you would get is religious conversion, right, as the Arab Empire would expand. All right, next question. But Mr. Burba, with the expansion of Islam in the Arab Empire, how did Islam remain united? And would this be a change or continuity? Well, we know that Islam would be split into Sunni and Shia followers at this point. But one of the things that came up would be developing what we called a common Islamic law, right? Sharia, as you'd call it. So what we'd get as the empire would expand is you would get Sunni and Shia scholars. They would have their interpretation of the Quran as well as political law and make sure that these two were blended together, right? And that's what we mean by the ulama, or religious scholars. And you'd have both Sunni and Shia. What they would do is they would make sure that Islamic law would be analyzed and it would be debated to ensure that it would be a part of everyday life in society. Or I guess you could say that there was an interpretation of how it would fall within everyday life and society. So this here you could see as a continuity. You know, this would allow the basic tenets and pillars of Islam to be implemented in everyday life, was because of the education that would exist, the scholars that would go ahead and make sure that there would be continuity of Islam to the next generations, even if the empire would expand. Okay, so 2 key words that you want to understand there, and just the value and importance of education. However, there would also be a change in what we call Sufism. One thing you understand about the Sufis is that they did not agree with this written law. All right, and here's a quote from your text. And I want you to take a minute, kind of just go ahead and think about this quote. And it goes like this: why not spend, and there's a typo, to say why not spend, why not spend, but to say why not spend time reading a love letter when you could spend time with the one who wrote it? All right. Or, wow, that's 2 typos. It should say, why spend time reading a love letter when you could spend time with the one who wrote it? All right, so I want you to go ahead. That's a Sufi quote. Think about it. What does that mean? Feel free to talk with your neighbors. Sorry, guys. Mrs. Burba is giving me mean looks right now. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, she's trying to watch a Dodger game, but I'm lecturing you guys. Anyways, so this is what the quote means. If you had something along the terms of that the Sufis had a more personal relationship, they feel that Islam should be more personalized, um, then you are absolutely right. Remember that they are completely against Sharia. Not, I don't want to say completely against, but they were against that written structure that existed. They believed that there was a more direct connection to Allah, right? Uh, that rather than following specific laws, that it was more something that one should just isolate themselves in society. That they should release themselves from materialism. This is very important because you could kind of just see this connection to Buddhism as well as Hinduism. So when it came down to converting the people of India, that the Sufis were very successful in this. All right. So to sum things up, you could see this as a change. That a branch out of Islam would be Sufism. I mean, they believed in Allah. However, the approach was a lot different. It was more personalized. It wasn't necessarily following the Quran or the five pillars. I mean, those were less stringent in terms of Sufism. But they did believe in a releasing of materialism as well as making sure that you follow, that you, that you have the direct connection to Allah. All right, very good. Um, so next thing comes up is women and men in early Islam. And I want you to understand that this is something that you could write down if you were to do an essay as changes. So what I want you to do is I'm actually going to play for you guys a video. And I want you to take notes on this video. What does a video tell us about women in Islam today? All right. I want you to take notes on this. Just go ahead and tell me, what does the video tell us about women and Islam today? Just write this in your notebook. You're not going to be assessed on this. I'm not going to test you, but I think this is important to understand specifically how this is relevant to current events. But in general, what does early Islam, what does the Quran say about the role of men and women? All right. So this is about 5-6 minutes long. But here we go.
Freedom at midnight. Well, that's how it feels. Have license. Will drive. In Jeddah, some women weren't going to wait for dawn. They were ready at 1 minute past the hour. What does it mean to you as a Saudi woman to be able to drive in your own country?
It means a lot. It means that today I'm an independent person. I can drive my kids to school. I can do the grocery. I can do the basic things that anyone could do. So it feels really important.
It's a moment in history. But some women who fought for this aren't behind the wheel, they're behind bars.
There's a real sense of celebration here. The women I've been talking to are excited. They know that other women who campaigned for this are in prison. But you can't take this night away from them.
And they head off to the highway. Rush hour in Jeddah this morning. Safana Dahlan was one of the first female lawyers in the country. Now she's one of the first female drivers.
I mean, some of the guys are making jokes and saying, oh, there's going to be so many accidents and so on. What do you think?
I mean, they've said a lot. But to be honest with you, they can say whatever they want.
Yeah.
The fact is that we're driving.
Yep.
It's 28 years since the first Saudi women's driving protest. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman may have now decreed that women should drive, but he's locked up the women campaigners so other protesters don't get ideas.
These women took a mission on behalf of many Saudi women. They adopted the mission to voice out what we wanted, even if we didn't necessarily say it. And I would like to thank them for that. Even though I don't necessarily agree completely with the way they've done it, but it doesn't mean that we are not grateful to all of them.
Demand exceeds the supply of instructors, so there are other ways to get a sense of what it's like to drive. Ride-hailing services have already made Saudi women's lives easier. But now, when Enam Al-Aswad has her license, she plans to work for one of them.
Do you think Saudi men are ready to be driven by a female taxi driver?
I think they are kind of ready because they prepare us that women they will drive, women they will do this, and there's a lot of sector now women they work with, like military, like hospital, or even the transportation women they never work in this sector, now they do. They will get used to it.
But as a divorcee, she still needs the permission of her adult son to travel.
I would like to go and renew my passport alone, going out alone, no need for permission. I think this is the next step. It's gonna happen. Yeah.
So driving is just the first step.
Yes. But it's good, big, huge step.
Learning about gearboxes and engines looks practical, not political. Yet Saudi women know while they can now drive, they still can't speak. Not if they want to campaign for more rights, demand change through democracy, not royal decree. Maybe when little girls in Saudi Arabia see their mothers taking on new roles, they'll be emboldened and not let men get in their way.
Well, Lindsay, this is getting Saudi Arabia some good PR, and they've let in foreign journalists to see it. But what sort of rights are women still denied that men have, and how open to scrutiny is the Saudi government?
Well, it is very good public relations, and certainly the Saudi government is making the most of that. They know how anachronistic this was, not letting women drive. Women I've been speaking to say, look, things have changed. They now automatically get custody of children if they divorce. And although the guardianship laws, the thing that says you must get permission from your, father or whoever to travel is still there, they have been eased. But I think the most important thing is to understand how this is happening. And it's not by democratization. Maybe the model is China, that you can have modernization, but that doesn't mean that you in any way have people power. Because the Crown Prince, who's only 32, he knows that the majority of people in this country...
All right, so that's the majority of the video, but I want to go ahead and just continue with our lecture. So let's go ahead. Go ahead. Any volunteers? What does the video tell us about women in Islam today? Ryan. I'm just joking, but I know Ryan's raising his hand. Anyways, so let's go to this. One thing you want to understand about looking at this, there's a lot of diversity, and this is what your text kind of talks about. There's a lot of diversity within Islam when you're looking at it today. And this could be diversity in a way that the religion is practiced, the interpretation of laws. You could look at the treatment of different social groups. So to generalize is definitely something that is not fair to do. And this is a quote from your book, which I think is very powerful. I'm going to read it to you guys, and I want you to kind of think about what it means. Many patriarchal practices are derived far more from established traditions of Middle Eastern cultures compared to the Quran itself, but they gained Islamic rationale in the writings of Islamic thinkers. What does this mean? All right, I want you to consider what this means. So take about a few seconds, maybe a minute. I want you to think about what this term practices. This is something you want to understand. Traditions. What's the difference between cultures and the Quran itself? All right, let's take a few seconds. So in general, if you had something along these terms in your discussion, what this is talking about is that generally speaking, that a lot of the patriarchal practices that exist today, so for example, the women having the ability to drive, right, or not being able to drive, this comes more from actual established traditions, and these could be political traditions. These could be, I guess you could say, just that are more associated with the geographic area than it is actually the Quran itself. But what the author of our text is saying is that these traditions were typically passed down simply because you had Islamic thinkers using their rationale and their interpretation of certain text, which would then be passed down, right? So it's not strictly something that's stated in the Quran itself, but it's some things that were passed down geographically in some areas from one generation to the next. All right, so in short, early Islam, here's some things that you want to understand about fact. Number one, spiritual. They were seen as equal. Your book gives several quotes, looking in terms of the practice of men and women in Islam, they were seen as equal. However, socially, they were not seen as equal, right? Your book gives the example of men being able to have just a polygamous marriage. However, one thing you understand is that they did say, though, that the women should be treated with equality, or they should be treated fairly, right? There were a lot of protections with women, right? So, for example, there were protections for women, and some elements of the Quran did state that they should have the right to own property, right? One thing that comes up is looking at the early practice of just the veil. So that's what it should say there. I don't know if it's showing up on your screen. But one thing you understand typically about this is that as time would go on, you could see this as a change, is that as time would go on, there would typically be more restrictions on women. And an example of this could be the wearing of the veil. But this wasn't something that was depicted in early Islam, because that was most likely something that was controlled for the higher class, right? Because for lower class, it was very tough to monitor, which was mostly in all of the societies that we looked at, just comparatively the majority of the population, right? So, big picture, things you want to understand about early Islam: spiritually, they were seen as equal. Socially, there was inequality. It was patriarchal, but a change would be as the empire would expand in some way, that some of these restrictions kind of became a little bit tougher on women and became more patriarchal. But once again, we want to understand this right here, that many of these practices are more from established cultural traditions rather than the Quran itself. All right. Okay. So just going through here, a couple things. India, if we want to look how India varied compared to Persia, well, only 20 to 25% would convert. Why do you think this would be? I want you to think about India. What religions were practiced? Hinduism, Buddhism. Well, here we go. There were too many differences, right? While Persia, we're looking at more of the monotheistic faiths, we're getting differences here because it's the polytheistic faiths. However, one thing that we would understand is that Sufis would be the one, going back, that would lead this conversion, because they were more similar, I guess you could say, to Hinduism and Buddhism compared to the Sunnis and Shias. Who would convert? I want you to think. Would it be the higher class, lower class, middle class? It would definitely be the lower caste, right? And the reason why would be you want to escape the caste, but as well as the tax. Remember, just like Christianity appealed a lot to the lower class during the classical era because of, I guess you could say, because of the social justice element that existed with it. I mean, same thing. I mean, you could look at for Islam, right? Very good. Who were the sheiks? So I want you to go ahead. I'm going to play this video. It's very short. I want you to just take notes on this because your book does mention this.
A viral video released in early 2015 shows a young American Sikh boy being harassed on the school bus by other kids. One young girl points at him and chants, "Terrorist, terrorist." This event and the videos spread online serve to illustrate the general ignorance of Sikhism. So, who are the Sikhs? The Sikhs are a people from northern India who subscribe to the dictations of 10 important gurus. Their philosophy is encapsulated in the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the holy book of Sikhism. In general, Sikhs believe in one God, equality among all, freedom of religion, and community service. The Sikh religion is independent from the other major monotheistic religions, as well as Buddhism and Hinduism. Sikhs are well known for a few distinct physical attributes. Men usually wear a specific type of turban called a dastar, and both men and women often wear a steel or iron bracelet called a kura. A Sikh's uncut hair and the bracelet are 2 of 5 articles of faith that they are expected to wear at all times. The other articles include a wooden comb, cotton undergarments, and a stylized dagger. These 5 articles symbolize a Sikh's commitment to their faith. Sikhism originated in the 15th century in the Punjab region of what is now northern Pakistan and India. Following the independence of southern Asian colonies from Britain in 1947, Punjab was split between Pakistan and India. This caused civil unrest and violence for a long time, although tensions have cooled since the 90s. The most holy Sikh Gurudwara, or place of worship, is the Golden Temple in India. The Pew Research Center reports that Sikhism is the 5th largest religion worldwide, and there are about 25 million adherents. 9 out of 10 Sikhs reportedly live in India, but there are large communities abroad, especially in the UK, the US, and Canada. In the video from the beginning, the original upload by the young Sikh boy included a description saying, quote, "Kids being racist to me and calling me an Afghani terrorist. If you don't know, I'm not Muslim, I'm Sikh," end quote. Since the September 11th attacks, there have been an increased number of hate crimes against Sikhs. Many people still don't know just how vastly different their religion is compared to Islamic extremism. If you haven't caught on to our new Seeker channel yet, make sure tiny village in India that is known for producing the best nightclub bouncers in New Delhi.
So, let's go back to our question. So a couple things. Who are the Sikhs? One thing you want to understand, and they brought this up at the very end of the video, is that there's a difference between. There was a quote saying that that I'm Sikh, I'm not a Muslim terrorist. And the one thing I want to make sure you understand is that's not to say that Muslims are terrorists. I think that quote was could be a little bit misleading. I think the main point that we want to get from this is there's a key difference looking at Sikhs as well as Muslims. But relating this to history, you could kind of see this as a change or a continuity, simply because remember, looking at this, is that there would be a conversion of religious faith once the Arab Empire would expand all the way up to India, but only be about to 20-25% would convert to Islam. But what we'd also get is this idea of religious syncretism. And remember, syncretism is a changing of one's beliefs or culture by implementing other beliefs and their own beliefs and culture within that. So here's what you got. What you understand is that Sikh is a blend in some way. Some consider it a blend of Islam and Hinduism. It has that social justice element of Islam, right? It is monotheistic, just like Islam. But looking at Hinduism, we have both karma and dharma. All right, so we can see that mixed between those two. All right, so we're almost done here, wrapping things up. The next point I want to get to is, very good, West Africa. You could definitely see West Africa. I mean, the trade would expand as far as West Africa, and you could see that Islam would have its religion, but there would be changes within Islam as well. A perfect example of this would be Ibn Battuta, right? Remember, Ibn Battuta, he spoke about his travels and what he noticed about Islam in Africa, and he noticed that there was less of a patriarchy there. Remember, women, he noticed, had several different partners, but yet they still went ahead and they prayed and met the 5 pillars by praying 5 times daily. You know, that women wanted to go ahead and take the pilgrimage to Mecca. So we could see that as both a change in continuity within the Arab Empire, within Islam, right? Here's a perfect example of this. You know, we talk about Ibn Battuta and how he wanted to take the pilgrimage to Mecca. And one of the things that he established were Islamic universities as well as mosque. Here's a perfect example of the syncretism. You can see the architecture of Africa, but you would then also get Islamic faith being practiced. So it's because of that trade network that Islam was able to expand to West Africa. All right. And sorry, guys, it should say Anatolia, not Anatoly. So, but Anatolia, one thing you want to understand was that 90% would also change and convert to Islam. And the reason why was before that, most of them were Christian. And remember that it was easier to go ahead and convert to Christianity. And this is one of the things that the Arab Empire would go ahead and preach. Even though there was a lot of violence, you know, that existed, you know, with the in terms of the government of some ways, just when they went ahead and conquered this territory, there was a mix of people that were willing to convert being also forced to convert. Okay. And then last but not least, we have the golden age of Islam. Right, what you want to understand, I'm going to go more in detail with this in our next few chapters, is that the expansion of the Arab Empire led to a lot of innovations in astronomy, mathematics, Arabic numerals, you know, a lot of art. You know, some people would argue this golden age of Islam had a tremendous influence on the Renaissance in Europe that would have come about 200 years later. So, all right. So, you know, this would go ahead and make the connection of expanding that trade network to Europe, right? All right, so that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. What I recommend that you do for the remaining class period is I've emailed you guys all this video. It's a review, watch it, pause it, quiz yourself, because second half of class, I'll give you guys about 20-30 minutes of study, and then That is if there's time. And then what you'll do is you'll go ahead and take your test.